My name is Amanda Sinclair, 31 years old. And 5 days ago, my husband of 7 years showed me exactly what our marriage vows meant to him when I walked through our front door 8 hours earlier than expected from what was supposed to be a 3-day business retreat in Portland. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. I had just returned from the Northwest Digital Innovation Summit, the most important conference in my field as a UX designer. For months, I'd been preparing my presentation on inclusive design frameworks that could revolutionize how tech companies approach accessibility. This wasn't just another work trip. This was my opportunity to finally break into the senior leadership track at Holloway Creative, the boutique design firm where I'd been grinding for 5 years. The presentation exceeded every expectation I had. Standing before 300 industry leaders in that gleaming conference center, watching executives from major tech companies scribble notes during my talk, seeing the approving nods from the Holloway partners who'd invested in sending me there, it was everything I'd worked toward. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 4 companies approached me with senior design director offers before I even left the building. But the real victory came when Patricia Holloway herself cornered me during the networking reception. "Amanda," she said, her voice carrying the authority that had built a multi-million-dollar agency, "we're creating a new VP of Innovation position, and frankly, there's only one person I can envision in that role. The salary bump alone would be $95,000 annually, but more than that, it was validation that every late night, every weekend spent perfecting client presentations, every social event I'd skipped to meet deadlines had been worth it. For 7 years, I'd been the primary breadwinner while my husband Derek pursued his passion projects. First, it was his craft brewery venture that lasted 14 months before market reality shut it down. Then came his attempt at launching a vintage motorcycle restoration business, which required me to co-sign a $23,000 loan for equipment and workspace rental. Most recently, he'd been building his brand as a freelance fitness trainer, which seemed to involve a lot of expensive certifications and very few actual paying clients. I'd supported every dream, every pivot, every "just give me 6 more months to make this work" conversation. When Derek needed $8,000 to complete his personal training certification program, I depleted our vacation savings. When his motorcycle shop lease required a guarantor, I put my credit score on the line. When he decided he needed professional headshots, a website, and premium gym equipment for his training business, I handled it all while working 50-hour weeks, because that's what marriage meant, right? Lifting each other up. The conference was scheduled to run through Friday evening, but a keynote speaker canceled due to illness, and the organizers wrapped everything up by Thursday at 2 p.m. Instead of staying for the optional vendor showcases, I decided to surprise Derek with the incredible news about my promotion. I could already picture his reaction, the genuine pride in his eyes, the way he would sweep me up in one of those bear hugs that made everything feel possible. We could finally start planning for that house we'd been dreaming about in Riverside Meadows, maybe even discuss starting the family we'd been putting off until we were more financially stable. The flight from Portland to Millfield Regional was smooth, and I practically bounced through the terminal. I had texted Derek that morning saying the conference was running long and I wouldn't be home until Friday night around 9 p.m. It was only Thursday at 3:45 p.m. Perfect timing for a surprise that would make this day even more memorable. Our cottage in Birchwood Lane looked exactly as I had left it 3 days earlier. Derek's black Ford pickup was parked in our driveway, which made sense since Thursdays were his usual admin and planning days for his training business. I grabbed my rolling suitcase and laptop bag, practically skipping up our front walkway. The afternoon sun was filtering through the maple trees we'd planted our second year of marriage, casting those golden shadows that made our little house look like something from a home and garden magazine. I had my key ready, planning to slip in quietly and catch him off guard. Maybe he'd be in his home office working on client programming, or in the kitchen making one of those protein smoothies he was always experimenting with. I imagined calling out, "Honey, I'm home," and watching his face light up with surprise and joy. But as I approached our front door, something felt immediately wrong. There was music playing. Not Derek's usual classic rock or the motivational podcasts he listened to while working. This was something smoother, more intimate.
jazz with a slow rhythmic beat that seemed oddly loud for mid-afternoon. And there were voices. Not Derek on a clank call like I had expected, but Derek's laugh mixed with someone else's. A woman's laugh, breathy, and familiar in a way that made my stomach clench.
I stood on our front porch, key halfway to the lock, and really looked at our house for the first time in years. The living room curtains were drawn tight in the middle of the day. There was a silver Honda Civic parked on the street that I didn't recognize, positioned just far enough from our driveway to look casual but close enough for convenience. Through our front window, I could make out the flicker of candles. Candles in our living room at 4 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. My hands started shaking as I noticed more details that painted a picture I didn't want to see. The outdoor cushions on our porch swing were arranged differently, like someone had been sitting there recently. Our usually neat front garden had footprints in the mulch. Not Derek's size 11 work boots, but smaller prints, like women's sneakers. The laughter from inside grew louder, more intimate, followed by sounds that made my blood turn to ice. I stood there, clutching my suitcase handle, listening to my husband's voice, saying things I'd never heard him say, not even to me. The woman's voice responded with encouragement and endearments that belonged in our bedroom, not in the home I'd been working myself to exhaustion to maintain. Time seemed to slow as I realized this wasn't a spontaneous moment of weakness. The candles, the music, the careful parking, the drawn curtains, this was planned. This was routine. This was my husband living a completely different life the moment he thought I was safely out of town. My phone buzzed with a text message. From Derek. Hope Portland is treating you well, beautiful. Missing you like crazy. Can't wait to hear all about your presentation tomorrow night. Love you. I stared at that message sent just 90 minutes ago while I was boarding my flight home, and something cold and calculating settled in my chest. Derek thought he was safe. He thought he had until Friday evening to clean up whatever this was and slip back into the role of supportive, faithful husband. He thought it was 3 states away, completely unaware that our marriage was apparently something he could pause and resume at his convenience. Instead of using my key, I quietly stepped back from our front door and walked to my car. I needed to think, and I needed to do it somewhere other than our front porch while listening to my husband betray everything we'd built together. As I drove away from Birchwood Lane, I caught a glimpse of movement through our bedroom window, and realized that Derek's afternoon activities weren't happening on our couch. They were happening in the bed where I'd kissed him goodbye 3 days ago, telling him I loved him and couldn't wait to come home to him. The question wasn't what I had walked in on. The question was what I was going to do with the next 18 hours before Derek expected me home, and how I was going to use that time to discover exactly how long my marriage had been a lie. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. I drove straight to Moonbeam Coffee on Highland Avenue, a place Derek and I had never been to together, where I could think clearly without running into anyone we knew. My hands were still shaking as I ordered a large dark roast and found a corner booth where I could process what I'd just witnessed. The promotion, the excitement, the future I thought we were building together, it all felt like it was happening to someone else now. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. Thursday, 4:15 p.m. Arrived home early from Portland conference. Found evidence of affair, silver Honda Civic parked nearby, candles lit inside house at mid-afternoon, intimate music playing, voices from the bedroom. Derek believes I'm still in Portland until Friday evening. I had 18 hours. 18 hours where Derek thought he was safe, thought his secret was protected, thought he could continue whatever this double life was without consequences. What could I accomplish in 18 hours? First, I needed to understand the scope of this betrayal. I opened my laptop right there in the coffee shop and logged into our shared wireless account, something I'd set up years ago when Derek complained about managing technology. As the primary account holder, I had access to everything, including location tracking that I never thought to check before. What I found made my stomach drop. Derek's phone had been at our house during times when he told me he was at the gym, meeting potential clients, or attending fitness industry networking events.
But more telling were the patterns I could see when I scrolled back through weeks of data. Every Tuesday when I had my standing design team meetings that ran until 7 p.m., every Thursday when I worked late on client revisions, last weekend when I'd gone to my college roommate's wedding in Sacramento, Derek had supposedly spent the weekend deep cleaning the house and catching up on administrative work for his business. Instead, his location data showed 6 hours at an address on Willowbrook Drive that I didn't recognize. I screenshotted everything, every location pin, every timestamp that proved Derek had been systematically lying about his whereabouts.
Next, I accessed our joint bank account, another responsibility I'd taken on because Derek claimed he was more creative than financial. The spending patterns told a story that made me feel physically sick. Charges at Romano's Bistro for meals that cost $85, far more than one person would spend on dinner. Multiple charges at Vintage and Vine Wine Bar during afternoons when Derek claimed he was doing solo workout sessions at the gym. But the most damning evidence was buried in the recurring charges I'd barely paid attention to before. $150 monthly payments to something called Serenity Spa and Wellness. A quick Google search revealed it was an upscale couples retreat center that offered romantic wellness packages and intimate partner therapy sessions. My husband had been taking another woman to couples therapy while married to me, using our joint money to work on his relationship with someone else. I sat back in the coffee shop booth, watching other people go about their normal Thursday afternoons, and realized Derek hadn't just been cheating. He'd been building an entirely separate relationship, complete with romantic dinners, spa retreats, and what appeared to be professional relationship counseling, all funded by my 60-hour work weeks. That's when the real anger hit me. Not the hot, explosive kind that leads to screaming matches and thrown objects. This was something colder, more focused. This was the anger of someone who realized they'd been treated like a financial institution rather than a wife. I checked the time. 5:30 p.m. Derek would be expecting his usual check-in call around 6:15. I always called him during conferences, a habit that now felt like another way he'd been managing his deception. That gave me 45 minutes to prepare my performance. I drove to TechMart and purchased a small digital recorder, the kind used for business meetings and interviews. Then I stopped at an electronics store and bought a hidden camera designed to look like a phone charger. If Derek was going to continue living his double life, thinking he was completely safe, I was going to document every moment of it. By 6:15, I was parked outside a different coffee shop, ready to make my call. Derek answered on the second ring, his voice warm and relaxed. "Hey, gorgeous. How's Portland treating you?" Exhausting, but incredible. The presentation went even better than I hoped. I think Holloway was really impressed. "That's amazing, babe. I'm so proud of you." The words sounded genuine, loving even. If I hadn't seen the evidence with my own eyes, if I hadn't heard him with another woman just 2 hours earlier, I never would have suspected anything. "How's your day been?" I asked, testing him. "Pretty low-key. Had a potential client consultation this morning, then spent the afternoon working on program development for the Johnson family. You know how Thursdays are for me, lots of behind-the-scenes work." Each lie was delivered so smoothly, so convincingly. He turned deception into an art form. "That sounds productive. Hey, I should probably get going. There's a networking dinner tonight that could be really good for my career." "Of course. Go network your brilliant brain off. I'll probably just order some takeout and catch up on that documentary series we've been meaning to watch." More lies. While I was supposedly networking in Portland, Derek was planning to continue his romantic evening with whoever had been in our bedroom. "I love you, Amanda." "Love you too." And for the first time in our 7-year marriage, the words felt hollow in my mouth. I hung up and immediately called the one person I trusted completely, my sister Jessica. "Mandy, aren't you supposed to be in some fancy conference right now?" "Jess, I need you to listen to everything I'm about to tell you, and I need you not to interrupt until I'm finished." I told her everything. The early return, the discovery, the evidence I had already gathered, what I was planning to do next. By the time I finished, Jessica was silent for a long moment. "Holy shit, Amanda,"
How long do you think this has been going on? Based on the bank records and location data, at least 6 months, maybe longer. The spa charges go back 8 months. What are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What do you do when you discover your husband has been living a double life so elaborate it includes couples therapy with another woman, all funded by your career success? I'm going to find out everything, every detail, every lie, every moment of this other relationship he's been building, and then I'm going to make sure he faces the consequences of every single choice he's made. Be careful, Mandy. Don't do anything that could backfire on you legally. I'm not going to do anything illegal, but Derek thinks he has this whole situation under control. He thinks he's successfully managing 2 relationships without either of us knowing about the other. Tomorrow, he's going to learn just how wrong he is.
I parked down the street and watched our house for an hour, documenting his routine. At 8:30, he opened the front door to bring in the mail, moving with the casual confidence of someone who believed his secrets were safe. At 9:15, the lights in our bedroom went on, the same bedroom where he'd been with another woman just hours earlier. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Missing you tonight. Can't wait to hear all about your big day tomorrow. Sweet dreams, beautiful." I stared at that message while watching him move around our bedroom, and I realized something profound. Derek wasn't just cheating on me, he was living 2 completely separate emotional lives, being a loving husband to me while being a romantic partner to someone else, switching between roles so seamlessly that he probably didn't even see the contradiction anymore. Tomorrow was Friday. Tomorrow I was supposed to come home excited about my promotion, grateful for his support, ready to celebrate our future together. Instead, I was going to walk into our house armed with evidence and a plan that would ensure Derek's carefully constructed double life collapsed entirely. But first, I needed to know everything. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Was she aware that Derek was married, or was she another victim of his elaborate deception? By tomorrow night, all of those questions would have answers. And Derek was going to discover that some secrets, once exposed, destroy everything they were meant to protect. Friday morning arrived with Derek's performance reaching Oscar-worthy levels. I'd spent the night at the Hampton Inn downtown, paying cash to avoid any digital trail that might expose my early return. My phone showed 4 messages from Derek, all sent between 7:30 and 8:45 a.m. "Morning, sunshine. Hope Portland is giving you the send-off you deserve. Grabbed coffee at that place you love on 5th Street. Made me miss you even more. Big client meeting today with the Martinez family. Wish me luck. Love you, gorgeous. Can't wait to have you home tonight." Each message was a masterpiece of manipulation, designed to paint the picture of a devoted husband missing his wife while building his business. I responded exactly as I would have before discovering the truth. "Morning, handsome. Last day here is packed, but so worth it. Good luck with the Martinez meeting. Love you." I was getting dangerously good at lying, but Derek had been an excellent teacher. By 9:30 a.m., I was parked across from Serenity Spa and Wellness on Elmwood Boulevard, the couples retreat center that had been charging our account $150 monthly. The building was an elegant, converted Victorian house with gardens and a discreet parking area. At exactly 10:15 a.m., Derek's black pickup truck pulled into the lot. I watched him walk to the entrance with flowers, expensive ones from Petals and Poetry, the same florist where he'd claimed he couldn't afford Mother's Day arrangements for his own mother last month. But Derek wasn't alone. A petite blonde woman in yoga pants and an oversized sweater stepped out of a white Lexus and met him at the entrance. She moved toward him with the comfortable familiarity of someone who'd done this dozens of times before. I turned on my recording device and began documenting what I was witnessing. Friday, 10:17 a.m.,
Subject arriving at Serenity Spa and Wellness with unidentified blonde female. Female appears to be mid-20s, drives white Lexus. License plate Charlie Delta 7942. Both entering facility together with Derek carrying flowers. For the next 2 hours, I sat in my car documenting their couples retreat session. According to the spa's website, their Friday morning sessions were relationship renewal workshops designed to help couples deepen their emotional and physical connection through guided exercises and therapeutic conversation. My husband was literally paying for professional help to improve his relationship with another woman while married to me. The session ended at 12:30 p.m., and I watched them emerge looking relaxed and happy. They stood in the parking lot talking for several minutes, Derek's hand resting casually on his lower back, in a gesture that spoke of intimate familiarity. She handed him what looked like a key, and he kissed her forehead before they separated to their respective vehicles. I followed the white Lexus at a careful distance. She drove to Riverside Heights, the same upscale neighborhood where Derek and I had been house hunting for our future dream home. She pulled into the driveway of a stunning colonial-style house with a 3-car garage and perfectly manicured landscaping. This wasn't some temporary apartment or secret hideaway. This was a family home, complete with children's bikes in the garage and a golden retriever that bounded out to greet her. I parked down the street and used my phone to research the address. The property records showed it belonged to Melissa Crawford, age 26, listed as a marketing consultant. But the most shocking detail was in the mortgage information. Derek Reynolds was listed as a co-borrower on the loan. My husband had purchased a house with another woman. My hands were shaking as I processed this information. Derek hadn't just been having an affair. He had been building an entirely separate life, complete with shared property ownership and what appeared to be a step-family relationship with this woman's children. The financial implications alone were staggering. If Derek was on the mortgage, he was legally obligated for hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt that I knew nothing about.
I drove back toward town, my mind racing with questions. How had Derek qualified for a mortgage without my knowledge? What other financial obligations had he taken on that I wasn't aware of? How long had this relationship been serious enough for him to co-sign on a house? My phone rang. Derek calling for his midday check-in, right on schedule. Hey, babe, how's the last day treating you? I could hear wind in the background, like he was outside. Through careful questioning, I learned he was supposedly between client meetings and grabbing lunch downtown. In reality, he was probably driving back from his spa session with Melissa. It's been incredible. I actually think this promotion is really going to happen, I said, watching him lie to me in real time, while I sat in a parking lot having just discovered he'd bought a house with another woman. That's amazing! I knew Portland would be your breakthrough moment. Listen, I might be running a bit late tonight. The Martinez consultation is turning into a whole family session, and you know how these fitness assessments can go. More lies. Derek had no meeting with any Martinez family. He was probably planning to spend the evening at his secret house with his secret girlfriend and her children. Take all the time you need, honey. I won't be home until around 9 anyway. Perfect. I love you, Amanda. I can't wait to celebrate your success. Love you too, I said, the words now feeling like poison in my mouth. After hanging up, I drove to Holloway Creative and requested an emergency meeting with Patricia Holloway herself. I needed professional advice, and I needed it from someone who understood complex financial situations. Amanda, you look terrible. What's wrong? Patricia said the moment I walked into her corner office. I told her everything. The affair, the secret house, the co-signed mortgage, the spa sessions, all of it. Patricia listened with the focused attention that had made her one of the most successful business owners in the city. Amanda,
this isn't just infidelity. This is financial fraud. If Derek has taken on mortgage debt without your knowledge, especially while you're married, this could have serious implications for your credit and financial future. She picked up her phone and called her personal attorney, Marcus Webb, who agreed to see me immediately. Within an hour, I was sitting in a law office learning about my legal options and the steps I needed to take to protect myself financially. The good news is that since you weren't aware of this mortgage and didn't sign any documents, you're likely not legally responsible for the debt, Marcus explained. The bad news is that Derek's actions may constitute identity fraud and financial misconduct that could still impact you during divorce proceedings. He advised me to immediately pull my credit report, document everything I'd discovered, and consider filing for legal separation before Derek could take on any additional financial obligations in my name. Armed with legal advice and a clear understanding of my rights, I spent the afternoon at the county recorder's office pulling every document related to Derek's secret house purchase. What I found was even more disturbing than I had imagined. Derek had listed his income as $85,000 annually on the mortgage application, nearly triple what his fitness training business actually generated. He'd used falsified bank statements and tax returns to qualify for the loan, but the most shocking discovery was that he'd listed me as his ex-wife on the application, claiming we'd been divorced for 2 years. My husband had legally declared our marriage over while applying for a mortgage with another woman. According to these documents, Derek Reynolds was a divorced entrepreneur earning $85,000 annually and purchasing his first home with his fiancée, Melissa Crawford. I sat in that sterile government office surrounded by the documentary evidence of Derek's elaborate deception and realized the scope of his betrayal went beyond simple adultery. He'd created an entire false identity, complete with fabricated financial records and a fictional relationship history that erased me from his life entirely. The Derek that I had been married to for 7 years was apparently just a character he played when he needed access to my income and benefits. The real Derek was someone who lived in Riverside Heights, co-parented another woman's children, attended couples therapy to strengthen his primary relationship, and had been planning a future that didn't include me for at least a year. My phone buzzed with another text from him. "Thinking about you. Can't wait to hear all about your triumphs tonight. You're going to change everything for us." I stared at that message while holding mortgage documents that proved Derek had already changed everything. He just had never bothered to tell me about it. Tonight, when I was supposed to come home excited about my promotion and ready to plan our future together, I was instead going to confront him with evidence that our entire marriage had been a lie he'd been systematically dismantling for over a year. But first, I needed to visit Melissa Crawford, because if Derek was living a double life, she deserved to know exactly what kind of man she'd bought a house with. And I deserved to understand just how many people had been deceived by Derek's masterful performance as a faithful husband and honest businessman. At 4:30 p.m., I stood on Melissa Crawford's front porch in Riverside Heights, holding a manila folder containing copies of every document I'd gathered. The golden retriever I'd seen earlier was now watching me through the front window, tail wagging in that universal dog way that suggested visitors were always welcome here. If only Melissa knew what kind of visitor I actually was. When she opened the door, I could see why Derek had been drawn to her. Melissa was beautiful in an effortless way, with the kind of natural blonde hair that looked sun-kissed and genuine. She was younger than me, probably around 26, with the confident posture of someone who'd never had reason to doubt the honesty of the people in her life. "Melissa Crawford?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Yes, can I help you?" "My name is Amanda Sinclair. I'm Derek Reynolds' wife." The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. She gripped the doorframe for support, her mouth opening and closing without making any sound. Behind her, I could hear children's voices, a boy and a girl arguing about something involving video games. "That's not..." "Derek isn't married," she whispered, but even as she said it, I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. "He's divorced. He showed me the papers." "He showed you falsified documents, Melissa. Derek and I have been married for 7 years. Here's our marriage certificate, and here's documentation showing that you've been unknowingly participating in mortgage fraud." I handed her the folder I'd prepared. Bank statements showing Derek's real income versus what he'd claimed on their mortgage application, the marriage certificate that proved our current legal status, property records showing how he'd listed me as his ex-wife while applying for the loan on her house. Melissa sank onto her porch steps, the folder trembling in her hands as she read through each document. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows across her perfect neighborhood, and somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing in other yards, living their normal lives, while Melissa's world collapsed around her. "I don't understand," she said finally, looking up at me with tears streaming down her face. "We've been together for 18 months. We're engaged. We bought this house together. He said his divorce was finalized 2 years ago." "There was no divorce, Melissa. While you thought you were building a relationship with a divorced entrepreneur, you were actually helping a married man commit financial fraud against his wife." She stared at the mortgage documents, her hands shaking. "But the house, we signed all these papers together. He put down $30,000 for the down payment. Money that came from our joint accounts. Money I earned working 60-hour weeks while he told me he was building his fitness training business. You weren't buying a house with your boyfriend, Melissa. You were buying a house with my husband using my income." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of her children's voices from inside the house. 2 kids who probably grown attached to Derek, who saw him as a potential stepfather figure, who had no idea that the man they were getting to know was living an elaborate lie. "The kids," she whispered as if reading my thoughts. "Emma and Tyler, they adore him. He takes Tyler to baseball practice. He helps Emma with her science projects. We were talking about him adopting them after we got married." My heart broke for her in that moment, but it broke even more for her children. Derek hadn't just been deceiving 2 women. He'd been building relationships with kids, letting them trust him, letting them imagine a future that was built entirely on lies. "Melissa, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Did Derek ever mention being married, even in passing, even as something he denied?" She wiped her eyes and thought for a moment. "There were a few times, like when he got phone calls he said were from his business partner, but he always seemed nervous about them. And sometimes he'd get text messages that made him really happy, but when I asked about them, he'd say they were just client updates. Those had been my texts, my loving messages to my husband received while he was playing house with another woman and her children. And the spa sessions, the couples therapy you've been attending together. What did Derek tell you about why you needed professional help?" "He said he wanted to make sure we built the strongest possible foundation for our marriage. He said he'd learned from his previous relationship, from you, I guess, and didn't want to make the same mistakes." Her voice cracked. "He said his ex-wife had been cold and focused only on work, and he wanted to make sure we stayed emotionally connected." The cruelty of that lie hit me like a physical blow. Derek had been using couples therapy to build his relationship with Melissa while simultaneously telling her that I, his actual wife, had been the problem in his previous marriage. He'd rewritten our entire history to make himself the victim and me the villain, all while stealing from our joint accounts to pay for their relationship counseling. "Melissa, I want you to know that you're a victim here too. Derek didn't just lie to me. He lied to you, to your children, to the bank, to everyone. But I need to know how deep this goes. Are there other financial entanglements, other legal documents he signed, anything else I should know about?" She went inside and returned with a small stack of papers. Joint bank account documents showing Derek as a co-owner. Insurance policies listing him as a beneficiary. Even a will she'd recently updated to include him as guardian for her children if something happened to her. "We opened the joint account 6 months ago when we started planning the wedding," she said numbly. "He said it would make managing household expenses easier." I looked at the bank statements she handed me and felt sick. Derek had been transferring money from our joint accounts to this new account he shared with Melissa. Thousands of dollars over the past 6 months, all funneled from my income into funding his other life. "The wedding," I said carefully. "When is it supposed to happen?" "December 15th. We already sent save the dates to family and friends. My parents are flying in from Ohio. His mother was supposed to help me pick out flowers next week." Derek's mother, who had dinner with us every Sunday, who called me her favorite daughter-in-law, who had been helping plan a wedding for her son to another woman while pretending to care about my marriage. "Melissa, Derek's entire family knows he's married to me. His mother, his brother Jake, all of them, which means they've all been lying to you for 18 months. She stood up abruptly and walked to the edge of her porch, staring out at the neighborhood where she'd thought she was building her future. "I feel so stupid," she said finally. "There were signs, weren't there? Things that didn't add up, but I trusted him completely." "You're not stupid. Derek is a master manipulator who's been perfecting this deception for years. The question now is what we're going to do about it." She turned back to me, and I could see something shifting in her expression. The shock and sadness were still there, but underneath them was a growing anger. "What do you mean?" "Derek thinks he's successfully managing 2 complete lives. He believes you don't know about me, and he believes I don't know about you. He's supposed to pick me up from the airport tonight, and then tomorrow he's probably planning to continue his normal weekend routine with you and the kids." "He is," she said quietly. "We're supposed to go house shopping tomorrow morning, looking at bigger places now that the kids are getting older." More house shopping. Derek had been planning to upgrade their shared property while still married to me, probably using my income to qualify for an even larger mortgage. "Melissa, I think Derek needs to learn that actions have consequences, and I think both of us deserve to see his face when his carefully constructed double life comes crashing down." She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her making a decision that would change everything for all of us. "What did you have in mind?" I pulled out my phone and showed her Derek's text from earlier. "Can't wait to have you home tonight. You're going to change everything for us." He's right about one thing. I am going to change everything, but probably not in the way he was expecting. For the first time since I'd arrived on her porch, Melissa Crawford smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who just realized they had the power to ensure that lies finally faced the light of truth. Melissa and I spent the next hour in her kitchen, surrounded by the evidence of Derek's elaborate deception, planning exactly how his double life would come to an end. Her children, Emma and Tyler, were in the living room playing video games, blissfully unaware that the man they'd grown to trust was about to be exposed as a fraud who'd been manipulating their entire family. "He's supposed to pick you up from the airport at 9 tonight," Melissa said, checking Derek's schedule on the shared calendar app they used to coordinate their relationship. "And tomorrow morning at 10, we're supposed to meet with a realtor to look at larger houses in Westfield Estates." I pulled out my phone and showed her Derek's text from earlier. "Flight on time? Can't wait to see your beautiful face and hear all about your success. Love you." He's performing for both of us simultaneously. Right now, he probably thinks he's the luckiest man alive. Successful wife coming home with a promotion, beautiful girlfriend planning their future together, and neither of us suspicious about the other. Melissa's jaw tightened. "Emma asked me yesterday if Derek was going to be her new daddy after we got married. I told her yes, and she got so excited she made him a drawing for his office." The cruelty of involving children in his deception added another layer to Derek's betrayal. These kids had formed emotional attachments to a man who was living a complete lie, setting them up for devastating disappointment when his house of cards inevitably collapsed. "Melissa, I need to ask you something difficult. Are you prepared for Emma and Tyler to learn that Derek isn't who they think he is? Because once we expose him, they're going to need a lot of support to understand why someone they trusted could lie so completely." She nodded firmly. "They deserve to know the truth, even if it hurts. I won't have them growing up thinking this kind of deception is normal or acceptable in relationships.
We spent the next hour coordinating our plan. Derek expected to pick me up from the airport at 9, take me home, and spend the evening hearing about my promotion and discussing our future. What he was actually going to get was the shock of his life. "I'll call him at 8:30 and tell him my flight was delayed," I explained. "That will give you time to be in position at our house on Birchwood Lane. I want him to walk into our living room and find you sitting there with all the evidence spread out on our coffee table." "What about you?" "I'll arrive exactly when he's not expecting me. The look on his face when he realizes both of his lives are colliding will be worth every sleepless hour I've spent planning this." Melissa called her babysitter to watch Emma and Tyler for the evening, telling them she had an important errand to run. As we prepared to leave her house, she paused at the front door. "Amanda, I keep thinking about all the times Derek talked about wanting to be a good role model for my kids. How he said he wanted to show Tyler what an honest, hardworking man looked like, and teach Emma what kind of man she should look for when she grows up. What kind of man was he actually showing them? A liar who steals from his wife to impress his girlfriend. A fraud who teaches children that love means keeping secrets and living double lives." At 7 p.m., I was positioned at the end of Birchwood Lane, watching our house while Melissa prepared to make her entrance. Derek's truck was in the driveway, and I could see lights on throughout the house. He was probably cleaning up, making everything perfect for my homecoming, completely unaware that his other life was about to walk through our front door. My phone rang, Derek calling, right on schedule for his pre-pickup check-in. "Hey, gorgeous. Just wanted to confirm your flight details. Still landing at 9? "Actually, honey, there's been a slight delay. Mechanical issues with the plane. Looks like I won't be landing until closer to 10:30. "Oh, no. Are you okay? Do you need me to bring anything? Food? Coffee?" His concern sounded so genuine, so loving. If I didn't know better, if I hadn't spent 2 days documenting his systematic deception, I would have been touched by his caring response. "I'm fine, just frustrated. These long conference trips always have some drama at the end." "Well, I'll be there waiting whenever you land. I love you, Amanda." "Love you too." I hung up and immediately texted Melissa, "Showtime. He thinks he has an extra hour and a half. He's all yours." From my position down the street, I watched Melissa's white Lexus pull into our driveway at exactly 8:15. She sat in her car for a moment, probably gathering courage for what was about to happen, then walked up our front walkway with the confidence of someone who had every right to be there. She used the key Derek had given her, the spare key I thought he kept for emergencies, to let herself into our house. Through our living room window, I could see Derek's silhouette moving around, probably in the kitchen, preparing some romantic gesture for my return. He had no idea that his two worlds were about to collide in the most spectacular way possible. 10 minutes later, I saw Derek appear in the living room, and even from a distance, I could tell something had gone really wrong with his evening plans. He was gesturing frantically, his hands moving in the animated way they did when he was trying to explain something complicated. Melissa was sitting calmly on our couch, the same couch where Derek and I planned our future together, where we'd discussed buying a house and starting a family. I grabbed my hidden camera and recording device and walked toward our house. This confrontation had been 18 months in the making, funded by my income, enabled by my trust, and it was time for Derek to face the consequences of every lie he had told. As I approached our front door, I could hear voices inside. Derek's voice, higher pitched than usual, talking rapidly. Melissa's voice, calm and controlled, asking questions. I used my key to let myself in, stepping into our entryway just as Derek was saying something about how Melissa had misunderstood the situation. "Hello, darling," I said, walking into our living room with my suitcase. "I caught an earlier flight. Surprise!" Derek turned toward me, and the expression on his face was something I'll never forget. Not guilt, not shame, even panic. It was the look of a man whose elaborate magic trick had just been exposed in front of his entire audience.
His mouth opened and closed without making any sound, his eyes darting between Melissa and me, like he was trying to calculate if there was any possible way to salvage this situation. "Derek," he finally managed, "you're early. I thought your flight was delayed." "Apparently, I'm full of surprises today, just like you are." I gestured toward Melissa, who was sitting surrounded by bank statements, mortgage documents, and marriage certificates. "I see you've met my husband, Melissa. How are you enjoying your tour of the house he bought with my money while planning to marry you?"
Derek sank into our armchair, the chair he'd picked out for our first apartment, the chair where he used to read me articles about our shared dreams. And for the first time in 7 years of marriage, I saw him completely speechless. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, finally. The same phrase he'd probably been rehearsing for months in case this moment ever came. "What does it look like, Derek?" Melissa asked, her voice steady despite the tears I could see forming in her eyes. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been married this entire time while convincing me you were divorced. It looks like you used your wife's income to buy our house, pay for our couples therapy, and fund our entire relationship. And from where I'm standing," I added, "it looks like my husband has been living a double life so elaborate it includes property fraud, identity theft, and emotional manipulation of children." Derek looked between us, and I could practically see him trying to find an angle, some way to reframe the situation where he wasn't the villain of his own story. "I can explain everything," he said, but his voice lacked any conviction. "We're listening," Melissa and I said, almost simultaneously. And for the first time in our marriage, Derek Reynolds was going to have to tell the complete truth to everyone in the room at the same time. Derek sat in our armchair for what felt like an eternity, his eyes moving between Melissa and me as if he was trying to calculate whether there was any possible explanation that could salvage the situation. Finally, he cleared his throat and attempted what I can only describe as the performance of his lifetime. "Okay, I know this looks bad, but you both need to understand that I never meant for anyone to get hurt." "That's not an explanation, Derek. That's an excuse. Start with the basics. When did you get divorced from Amanda?" We didn't get divorced." "So you're still married?" "Yes, but..." "No buts," I interrupted. "You're either married or you're not. You can't be partially married when it's convenient for you." Derek stood up and began pacing our living room, running his hands through his hair in the gesture I'd once found endearing, but now recognized as his tell when he was scrambling to create a believable lie. "The situation is complicated. Amanda and we've been having problems for years. We're more like roommates than husband and wife. I stayed because of financial stability, and she stayed because she's comfortable with the arrangement." I stared at him in disbelief. "Financial stability? Derek, I've been supporting your every business venture for 7 years. I've paid for your equipment, co-signed your loans, covered your health insurance, and apparently funded your entire relationship with Melissa. What financial stability were you providing?" "And what about me?" Melissa's voice was ice cold. "What was I to you if you were only staying married for financial convenience?" Derek turned to her with desperation in his eyes. "You were real, Melissa. What we have is real love. With Amanda, it's just a business arrangement at this point." "A business arrangement?" I pulled out my phone and started reading from Derek's recent text messages. "Let me share some of our recent business correspondence. Missing you tonight. Can't wait to hear all about your big day tomorrow. You're going to change everything for us. Love you, gorgeous." Very professional communication, don't you think? Melissa was reading through the bank statements spread out across our coffee table. "Derek, these spa sessions we've been attending, the ones you said were to build a strong foundation for our marriage, you paid for them with Amanda's money?" "It's our joint account. It's money I earned," I clarified. "Money I made working 60-hour weeks while you were building your relationship with Melissa." "And the house," Melissa continued, her voice getting stronger. "Our house in Riverside Heights. You told me you'd saved for years to afford the down payment." Derek's pacing became more frantic. "I did save. I contributed to our household finances." "Show me."
I said. Show us both your actual income from your fitness training business. Because I've been paying our taxes, Derek, and your business income last year was $14,000. That's barely enough to cover your truck payment, let alone contribute $30,000 to a house down payment, or pay for couples therapy, or romantic dinners, or engagement rings. She held up her left hand, showing a diamond ring I'd never seen before. When did you buy this, Derek? Because I don't see any jewelry store charges in our joint account. I used savings. What savings? I walked to our home office and returned with our financial records. Here are our complete financial records for the past 3 years. Show me these mysterious savings accounts. Show me where you earned enough money to buy an engagement ring while also contributing to a house purchase while also paying for spa treatments. Derek stopped pacing and sank back into the chair. For the first time since we'd cornered him, he looked genuinely defeated rather than just scrambling for explanations. You want the truth, he said. Fine, yes, I used Amanda's income to pay for things with Melissa, but it's not what you think. Enlighten us, Melissa.
Amanda makes 10 times what I make. She's always made more money. I felt like I was never going to be enough for her, like she was always looking down on me for not being as successful. I felt anger rise in my throat. So you decided to steal from me to impress another woman? It wasn't stealing. We're married. What's yours is mine. Legally. What's mine is ours, I corrected. But what you did was take money from our marriage to fund a completely separate relationship. That's not sharing marital assets, Derek. That's theft. Melissa set down the bank statements and looked directly at Derek. What about the kids, Emma and Tyler? You've been building relationships with them, letting them get attached to you, letting them think you're going to be their stepfather. Did you think about what this would do to them? Derek's face crumpled. I love those kids. You love them enough to lie to them every single day? You love them enough to teach them that it's okay for adults to live completely dishonest lives? I was going to handle everything. I was going to figure out how to make it work. How? I demanded. How exactly were you planning to make this work? Were you going to tell me about Melissa? Were you going to tell Melissa the truth about our marriage? Or were you just going to keep stealing from me to maintain your double life indefinitely? I don't know, he admitted, and for the first time, his voice broke completely. I don't know. It just kept getting more complicated, and I didn't know how to fix it without losing everything. Melissa stood up from the couch and looked directly at Derek. What about the kids, Emma and Tyler? You've been building relationships with them, letting them get attached to you, letting them think you're going to be their stepfather. Did you think about what this would do to them? Derek's face crumpled. I love those kids. You love them enough to lie to them every single day? You love them enough to teach them that it's okay for adults to live completely dishonest lives? I was going to handle everything. I was going to figure out how to make it work. How? How exactly were you planning to make this work? Were you going to tell me about Melissa? Were you going to tell Melissa the truth about our marriage? Or were you just going to keep stealing from me to maintain your double life indefinitely? I don't know, he admitted, and for the first time, his voice broke completely. I don't know. It just kept getting more complicated, and I didn't know how to fix it without losing everything. Melissa stood up from the couch. You were willing to let me plan a wedding to a married man. You were willing to let me send save the dates to my family, let them book flights, let my children get excited about having a new father, all while you were lying about the most basic fact of your life. I love you, Melissa. I really do. You don't love me, she said firmly. You love the idea of me. You love having someone who doesn't know your real financial situation, who doesn't see through your excuses, who believes your stories about being a successful entrepreneur, but you don't love me enough to be honest with me. Derek turned to me with pleading eyes. Amanda, we can work this out. We can go to counseling, figure out how to rebuild. Derek, you've been taking another woman to couples counseling while married to me. You've been working on your relationship with her using money you stole from me. What exactly do you think we could rebuild? Our marriage, what we used to have. "We never had anything real," I said. And as the words came out, I realized they were true. What we had was me working to support your dreams while you used my support to pursue other women. That's not a marriage, Derek. That's me being used. Melissa walked toward our front door, then paused. "Derek, I need you to stay away from my house, away from my children, and away from me. I'll be contacting a lawyer about removing you from the mortgage and any other legal entanglements we have." "Melissa, please." "No. You've taught my children that love means lies, that commitment means keeping secrets, that adults can't be trusted to tell the truth about basic facts. Emma asked me yesterday if she could call you Daddy after the wedding. Do you understand how devastating this is going to be for them?" Derek's face was pale. "I never wanted to hurt the kids." "But you did. You hurt them by involving them in your deception. You hurt them by letting them love someone who was never real." After Melissa left, Derek and I sat in silence for several minutes. The house felt different, smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in on secrets that could no longer be contained. "What happens now?" Derek asked quietly. I looked at this man I'd been married to for 7 years, this person I'd supported and trusted and believed in, and realized I didn't know him at all. The Derek I'd fallen in love with was apparently just a character he played when he needed something from me. Now, you learn that actions have consequences. You're going to find out what it's like to live honestly for the first time in years, and you're going to discover that the life you built on lies doesn't actually belong to you. Are you filing for divorce? Derek, you filed for divorce 18 months ago when you bought a house with another woman and started planning a wedding. I'm just making it official. I handed him a manila envelope I'd prepared earlier that day. Those are divorce papers. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live, and you're prohibited from accessing our joint accounts effective immediately. He opened the envelope with shaking hands. "Amanda, please, I know I messed up, but we can fix this. I'll end things with Melissa. I'll do whatever you want." You already ended things with Melissa. And you ended things with me 18 months ago when you decided that stealing from your wife to court another woman was an acceptable way to live. Derek looked around our living room, taking in the evidence of his deception scattered across our coffee table, the life he'd destroyed with his lies, the future he'd forfeited for the temporary thrill of living multiple lives simultaneously. "I never meant for it to go this far," he said one final time. "But it did go this far, Derek, and now everyone knows exactly who you really are."
The next morning, Derek was gone. He'd packed 2 suitcases and left sometime before dawn, leaving behind only a handwritten note on our kitchen counter that read, "I'm sorry for everything. I'll be staying at Jake's until I figure things out. I love you." Even his apology was a lie. I knew Jake lived in a studio apartment and wouldn't have room for a long-term house guest. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with calls from Derek's family. His mother, Catherine Reynolds, was the first to call, her voice tight with the kind of controlled anger that suggested Derek had already spun his version of events. "Amanda, Derek told us what happened last night. He said you've been having marital problems and that you brought his friend over to humiliate him." I set the phone to speaker and poured myself coffee, marveling at Derek's ability to rewrite reality even when caught red-handed. "Catherine, Derek's friend is named Melissa Crawford. She's been living with Derek as his fiancée for 18 months while he told her he was divorced from me. They bought a house together using money from our joint accounts." The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, Catherine spoke again, her voice smaller. "That can't be true. Derek wouldn't do that." "I have documentation, Catherine, bank statements, property records, mortgage applications where Derek listed me as his ex-wife. Would you like me to email them to you?" I need to call you back." The second call came from Derek's brother Jake, who skipped pleasantries entirely. "Amanda, what the hell is going on? Derek showed up at my place at 5 this morning crying about how you destroyed his life." "Jake, Did Derek mention that he's been married to another woman in all but legal terms? That he's been stealing from our joint accounts to fund a completely separate relationship? He said you were jealous of his friendship with some woman and blew everything out of proportion. I found myself almost laughing at Derek's audacity. Even faced with irrefutable evidence, even after being confronted by both women simultaneously, he was still trying to control the narrative. Jake, I'm going to send you the same documentation I offered your mother. Look at it carefully and then ask yourself if this sounds like jealousy over a friendship. By noon, I'd received calls from 6 different family members and mutual friends, each with a slightly different version of Derek's story. In some versions, I was a controlling wife who wouldn't let him have female friends. In others, I was a workaholic who had driven him away with my career focus. In one particularly creative version, Melissa was supposedly a business partner who'd been helping Derek launch a new venture. But the most disturbing call came from Emma, Melissa's 8-year-old daughter. Melissa had given her my number after Emma insisted she needed to talk to Derek's other wife. Mrs. Amanda? The voice was small and confused. My mom said Derek was lying about being divorced. Does that mean he's not going to be my new daddy? My heart broke for this little girl who'd been caught in the crossfire of Derek's deception. Emma, honey, Derek made some very bad choices that hurt a lot of people, including you and your mom and your brother. Sometimes adults make mistakes that affect the people they care about. But he promised he would help me with my science project for the school fair. He said he'd always be there for me and Tyler. I know, sweetheart, and I'm sure Derek cared about you, but sometimes people make promises they can't keep, and that's not your fault or your mom's fault. It's Derek's fault for not being honest. After that call, I realized Derek's betrayal extended far beyond financial fraud and adultery. He'd essentially become a parental figure to 2 children, letting them form deep emotional attachments while knowing his entire relationship with their mother was built on lies. The psychological damage to Emma and Tyler might take years to heal. At 2 p.m., my lawyer, Marcus Webb, called with an update on the legal proceedings. Amanda, I've reviewed all the documentation you provided, and Derek's situation is worse than we initially thought. The mortgage fraud alone could result in federal charges. Using falsified income statements and claiming to be divorced on official documents constitutes multiple felonies. What does that mean practically? It means Derek could be facing prison time, not just divorce proceedings. The bank that issued the mortgage has the right to demand immediate repayment if they discover the application was fraudulent. Melissa could lose her house. That afternoon, I drove to Riverside Heights to check on Melissa. I found her in her kitchen, surrounded by legal documents and empty coffee cups, looking like she hadn't slept in days. How are Emma and Tyler handling everything? I asked. Emma keeps asking when Derek is coming back. Tyler is angry and says he never liked Derek anyway, but I caught him crying in his room this morning. She rubbed her eyes. I've scheduled them both for counseling. They need professional help processing this betrayal. And you? How are you handling it? I'm furious, she said simply, not just about the lying, but about how calculated it all was. Do you know he had photos of Emma and Tyler in his wallet? He showed them to people at work, talked about his kids like they were actually his kids. She showed me a folder of documents her lawyer had prepared. I'm filing fraud charges against Derek. The bank is demanding full mortgage disclosure, and if they determine the loan was obtained fraudulently, they can accelerate the entire balance. What does that mean for you and the kids? We could lose the house. Even though I was an innocent party, if Derek's income information was falsified, the entire mortgage could be voided. Her voice cracked. Emma and Tyler have been through enough upheaval. The idea of having to move again, leave their schools, their friends. I made a decision that surprised even me. Melissa, what if I helped you refinance the house in your name only?
I have documentation proving Derek used my income to make those payments. You shouldn't lose your home because Derek committed fraud." She stared at me. "Why would you do that? You don't owe me anything." "Because you and your children are victims here too, and because Derek's actions shouldn't destroy innocent people's lives." That evening, I received a call from Detective Sarah Martinez with the Millfield Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Derek's elaborate deception had attracted the attention of multiple agencies. "Mrs. Sinclair, we've received reports of potential identity fraud, mortgage fraud, and financial elder abuse in connection with your husband's activities. Can you come in tomorrow to provide a statement?" Financial elder abuse? According to our investigation, Derek obtained a credit card in his mother's name and ran up $18,000 in charges over the past year. Mrs. Catherine Reynolds wasn't aware of the account until she received a collections notice yesterday. I sat down heavily. Derek had been stealing from his own mother while portraying himself as a devoted son. The scope of his deception kept expanding, revealing new victims with each passing hour. "There's more," Detective Martinez continued. "We've discovered that Derek has been operating under multiple business licenses using different variations of his name. Derek Reynolds, Derek R. Sinclair, Dr. Reynolds Fitness Consulting. He's been taking payment from clients under these different identities and not paying taxes on the income. How many people has he stolen from?" "We're still investigating, but so far we've identified at least 12 victims, including you, Miss Crawford, his mother, and several business clients who paid for services they never received." The next morning, Derek's carefully constructed world continued to collapse. His fitness training certification was revoked when the licensing board discovered he'd lied about his credentials. 3 former clients came forward claiming Derek had taken payment for training packages he'd never delivered. The gym where he'd claimed to have a training partnership issued a statement saying they'd never had any business relationship with Derek Reynolds. Catherine Reynolds called me again, this time crying. "Amanda, I'm so sorry. I found the credit card statements. Derek's been stealing from me for over a year. I thought I was losing my memory when bills kept arriving for things I didn't remember buying." "Catherine, this isn't your fault. Derek is a master manipulator who's been deceiving everyone who trusted him." "How did I raise a son who could do this? How did I not see what he was becoming?" "Because you loved him and trusted him, and normal people don't expect the people they love to be capable of such elaborate deception." That afternoon, Derek called me for the first time since he'd left. His voice was different, smaller, defeated. "Amanda, I need to talk to you. Everything is falling apart. The police want to interview me. My mom won't take my calls. Jake kicked me out. I'm staying in my truck." "Derek, you created this situation. You have to deal with the consequences." "I know I messed up, but I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to hurt so many people." "But you did hurt people. You hurt me, Melissa, her children, your own mother, your clients. You didn't accidentally stumble into this, Derek. You made deliberate choices for months to steal, lie, and manipulate. What am I supposed to do now?" "You're supposed to face the legal consequences of your actions, get honest about who you really are, and try to make whatever amends are possible to the people you've damaged." "Will you testify against me if this goes to trial?" "Derek, I'm going to tell the truth about what you did. That's not testifying against you. That's testifying for justice." After hanging up, I realized that Derek still didn't understand the gravity of what he had done. Even facing criminal charges, even with his entire life in ruins, he was still thinking about this situation in terms of what was happening to him rather than what he'd done to others. The investigation would continue for months. The legal proceedings would take even longer. But for the first time since discovering Derek's betrayal, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. The truth was finally out, and everyone who'd been deceived by Derek's elaborate lies could begin the process of healing and rebuilding their lives honestly. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment in Harbor Point, watching the sunrise paint gold streaks across Millfield Bay. The space was smaller than the house I'd shared with Derek, but every piece of furniture, every photograph on the walls, every bill payment reflected my own choices and my own income. For the first time in 7 years, I was living a life that was entirely my own.
The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier. Derek had initially tried to claim spousal support, arguing that he'd sacrificed his career potential to support my professional growth. His lawyer quickly dropped that strategy when faced with the overwhelming evidence of Derek's financial fraud and the criminal charges pending against him. Derek himself was currently serving an 18-month sentence for mortgage fraud, identity theft, and elder financial abuse. A prosecution had offered him a plea deal after prosecutors discovered he'd been running similar schemes in 2 other states. In total, Derek had defrauded 19 people out of more than $200,000 over 3 years. I wasn't his first victim. I was just the most recent one with the resources to fight back. The sentencing hearing had been surreal. Derek stood before the judge looking genuinely confused about how his relationship complications had resulted in felony convictions. Even facing prison time, he seemed unable to grasp that systematic deception and theft weren't normal relationship challenges. "Your Honor," he'd said during his statement, "I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I was just trying to make everyone happy." Judge Patricia Williams had been unimpressed. "Mr. Reynolds, you stole from your wife, your girlfriend, your elderly mother, and multiple business clients. You falsified legal documents, committed mortgage fraud, and emotionally manipulated children. These weren't mistakes or relationship complications. These were calculated criminal acts that harmed multiple families." The restitution hearings were ongoing. Derek would likely be paying back his victims for decades, assuming he ever developed legitimate earning capacity. His fitness training certifications had been permanently revoked, and his criminal record would make finding employment challenging. But the most satisfying outcome hadn't been Derek's conviction. It had been watching the people he'd hurt rebuild their lives stronger than before. Melissa had successfully refinanced her house in her name only, with my help providing documentation that proved Derek's mortgage fraud. She'd started her own marketing consultancy and was earning more money than she ever had working for other companies. Emma and Tyler were thriving in therapy and had both expressed relief that the lying man was no longer part of their lives. "You know what's funny?" Melissa had told me during one of our monthly coffee meetings. "I thought I needed Derek to feel complete, to give the kids a father figure, to validate my worth as a partner. But watching him get exposed taught me that I'd rather be alone than be with someone who lies about basic facts of their existence." Catherine Reynolds, Derek's mother, had become an unexpected ally. After discovering that Derek had been stealing from her for over a year, she'd not only pressed charges but had also started attending a support group for families of financial abuse victims. I kept making excuses for Derek's behavior. When his businesses failed, when he couldn't pay his bills, when he moved back home multiple times as an adult. I thought I was being a supportive mother, but I was actually enabling him to never face consequences for his choices. Catherine had started volunteering with elder abuse prevention programs, using her experience to help other families recognize the warning signs of financial manipulation. The ripple effects of Derek's exposure had been far-reaching. 3 other women had come forward with stories of Derek attempting to start relationships with them while claiming to be divorced. His pattern of targeting financially stable women and gradually gaining access to their resources had apparently been ongoing for years. But perhaps the most meaningful change had been in my own life. The promotion to VP of Innovation at Holloway Creative had exceeded every expectation I'd had. Without the constant drain of Derek's manufactured crises and financial emergencies, I'd thrown myself into work with renewed energy and focus. I'd led the development of 3 award-winning accessibility initiatives that had revolutionized how our industry approached inclusive design. I'd been invited to speak at conferences across the country, not as Derek's wife who happened to have a successful career, but as Amanda Sinclair, recognized expert in user experience innovation.
My bank account reflected this professional growth. Without Derek's secret spending, without his emergency loan requests, without his business venture investments that never materialized, I'd been able to save more money in 6 months than I had in the previous 3 years combined. But the real transformation had been personal. I'd started therapy not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd allowed myself to be so thoroughly deceived for so long. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had helped me identify the patterns, how I'd confused being needed with being loved, how I'd mistaken financial dependence for partnership, how I'd normalized Derek's constant crises as just part of supporting someone's entrepreneurial spirit. "You weren't naive, Amanda," Dr. Walsh had told me. "You were loving. The problem wasn't your capacity for trust, it was Derek's willingness to exploit it systematically." I'd learned to recognize the difference between supporting someone's legitimate dreams and enabling someone's unwillingness to face reality. I had discovered that healthy relationships involve mutual support, not one person constantly rescuing the other from self-created problems. I'd also learned to enjoy my own company.
The loneliness had been real, especially in the first few months. I'd catch myself automatically setting 2 coffee cups in the morning or reaching for my phone to share something funny with Derek before remembering that the person I'd thought I was married to had never actually existed. But gradually, the relief of not walking on eggshells, not managing someone else's lies, not discovering new betrayals had outweighed the sadness of losing what I'd thought we had. I'd started dating again, carefully, nothing serious yet, but I'd had dinner with Robert, a fellow designer who was refreshingly honest about his financial situation and relationship history. I'd gone to a concert with Michael, a friend of Jessica's, who paid his own bills and had never asked me to cover emergency expenses or co-sign any loans. The most surprising development had been my friendship with 2 other women who'd been victims of Derek's schemes. Sarah Martinez from Portland and Jennifer Kim from Seattle had both contacted me after Derek's arrest made regional news. They'd each experienced similar patterns of Derek claiming to be divorced, gradually gaining access to their resources, and building elaborate false relationships. The scary thing, Sarah had told me during a video call, is how good he was at making each of us feel like we were the most important person in his life, like he'd never met anyone who understood him the way we did. We'd formed an informal support network, helping each other process the trauma of discovering that months or years of our lives had been built on systematic deception. More importantly, we'd learned to recognize the early warning signs of financial manipulation and emotional exploitation. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Dinner tonight? That new place on Harbor Drive. I have news." I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely, 7 p.m. Jessica had been my anchor through the entire ordeal, never once suggesting I should work things out with Derek or give him another chance. She'd helped me move, listened to me process my anger and sadness, and gradually helped me remember who I was when I wasn't constantly managing someone else's deceptions. As I got ready for dinner, I caught my reflection in the bedroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd walked into her house 8 months ago to discover evidence of Derek's betrayal. This woman's shoulders weren't hunched with constant stress. Her eyes weren't scanning for signs of deception or preparing for the next manufactured crisis. Her smile was genuine, not performative. At dinner, Jessica's news was that she and her husband Mark were expecting their second child. As I hugged her and celebrated their joy, I realized something profound. I was genuinely happy for them, with no undercurrent of envy or bitterness about my own situation. For the first time in years, I wasn't comparing my life to others or feeling like I was behind some imaginary timeline. Walking home along the harbor, I thought about the woman I'd been 8 months ago. She'd worked herself to exhaustion supporting a man who'd been using her efforts to betray her. She'd believed that love meant sacrificing her own financial security for someone else's dreams. She'd confused being needed with being valued, financial dependence with partnership, elaborate lies with complicated circumstances. That woman was strong, but she was strong in service of someone else's weakness. This woman, walking along the water with no one's crises to solve but her own, was strong for herself. Derek thought he could have everything: multiple relationships, unlimited financial support, the freedom to live however he wanted without consequences. In the end, he'd lost everything, including the ability to claim he'd been loved by someone who truly knew him. I'd thought I'd lost everything when I discovered his betrayal. Instead, I'd found myself. And myself, it turned out, was exactly who I'd been waiting to meet. Some people build their lives on elaborate deceptions, thinking they can manage multiple versions of reality indefinitely. But truth has a way of surfacing, and when it does, it exposes everything that was fake while revealing what was real all along. I was real. My success was real. My capacity for love and trust and building genuine relationships was real. Derek's lies couldn't change any of that. They could only temporarily hide it from view. Now, standing in my kitchen, watching the sunrise over Millfield Bay, I knew that whatever came next in my life would be built on honesty, mutual respect, and the kind of love that doesn't require anyone to live a lie.